The grand hall smelled of pine and burning wax, a scent that should have been comforting but instead wrapped around my throat like a noose. I stood at the very edge of the crowd, where shadows pooled thickest, and the golden light from hundreds of candles couldn't quite reach. My pale hair was pulled back so tightly it made my scalp ache, but I'd learned long ago that invisibility required discipline. The less of myself I showed, the safer I remained. Tonight was the midwinter gathering, the most significant event in the kingdom's social calendar. Wolves from every territory had traveled for days to attend, their expensive clothes and confident laughter filling the space with an energy that made my skin prickle. I didn't belong here. I'd only been allowed to attend because my father, before his disgrace, had once held a minor position in the outer court. Now, 3 years after his fall, I was tolerated at best, a ghost haunting the periphery of a world that had already forgotten me. I watched them all with careful eyes. The way power moved through the room like a visible current, flowing between the strongest, the wealthiest, the most connected. I'd spent years studying these patterns, learning to read the subtle shifts in posture, the unspoken hierarchies that governed everything. It was the only skill I had left, this ability to observe what others overlooked. My fingers found the rough edge of my sleeve, worrying at a loose thread. I thought of my mother, buried now for 5 winters, and the last thing she'd told me. Strength isn't always loud, little one. Sometimes it's knowing when to watch, when to listen, and when to act. I'd carried those words like stones in my pockets, heavy and grounding, though I'd never fully understood what she meant about acting. I'd only ever mastered the watching. A hush fell over the crowd, sudden and absolute. He entered from the northern doors, and the air itself seemed to shift in response. King Dominic Ashenfell, the Alpha King, moved through the parting crowd with the kind of presence that made my chest tighten. I'd seen him before, of course, everyone had, but never this close. He was taller than I'd expected, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples despite his relatively young age. There were rumors about what he'd endured to claim his throne, battles that had left scars, both visible and hidden, betrayals that had taught him to trust no one. He wore black, simple and severe, which only emphasized the raw authority that emanated from him. His eyes swept the room with the practiced distance of someone who'd learned not to expect warmth from crowds. There was loneliness in that gaze, I realized with a start. A isolation so profound, it mirrored my own. Beside him walked Lady Celeste Ravenmore, his intended bride. She was everything I wasn't, tall, voluptuous, with raven hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall of silk. Her red dress clung to curves that commanded attention, and her smile was the kind that promised both pleasure and danger. The engagement had been announced 2 months ago, a political alliance that would unite the northern and eastern territories. Everyone said it was a perfect match. I watched the way she touched his arm, possessive and confident, and something in my stomach twisted. Not jealousy. I had no claim to such feelings, but something else. A sense of wrongness I couldn't name. The evening progressed with the usual formalities. Speeches were made, toasts were raised, and I remained exactly where I belonged. Nowhere. I moved between the pillars like a shadow, refilling my glass with water from the side tables, observing the complex dance of pack politics playing out before me. It was during one of these circuits that I overheard them. I'd slipped into a narrow corridor that led to the servants' passages, needing a moment away from the pressing crowd. The stone walls here were older, the air cooler. I was about to return when I heard voices from an adjacent alcove, low and urgent, barely above a whisper. And confirmed for midnight, the southern entrance, just as we discussed. The voice was female, smooth and cultured. And you're certain he suspects nothing? A man this time, accent thick with Eastern inflections. He trusts me completely. The fool actually believes I love him. Laughter, soft and cruel. My blood turned to ice. I recognized that laugh. Lady Celeste. The payment will be transferred once it's done. The Valdorn clan will be grateful for your contribution. An Alpha King's head brings a high price. I pressed myself against the cold stone, my heart hammering so hard I was certain they would hear it. The Valdorn clan. Everyone knew that name. They were exiles, wolves who'd been banished from the kingdom 10 years ago for attempting to overthrow the previous king. They'd been gathering strength across the border ever since, waiting for an opportunity to strike. How many men will be in position? Celeste's voice had lost all its honeyed warmth. 15 of our best. They'll be dressed as servants, already inside the castle walls. When he retires to his chambers at midnight, they'll be waiting, quick and clean. By dawn, you'll be the grieving almost widow, and we'll have eliminated the last Ashenfell. And my payment? Gold, titles, and freedom to marry whom you choose. Isn't that what you wanted? To escape this frozen wasteland? More than anything. My hands were shaking. I needed to move, to breathe, to think. But my body had turned to stone. They were going to kill him. Tonight. In just a few hours. And no one knew. No one suspected that the woman smiling at his side, accepting the court's admiration and well wishes, was about to sell him to his enemies. I thought of my mother's words again. Sometimes it's knowing when to act. But what could I do? I was nothing. No one would believe me. If I went to the guards with wild accusations about the future queen, they'd likely arrest me for slander. I had no proof, no evidence beyond words overheard in a darkened corridor, and even if I could convince someone, who would listen to the disgraced daughter of a fallen courtier? The voices moved away, their footsteps fading into silence. I waited until I was certain they were gone, before I allowed myself to slide down the wall, my legs finally giving out beneath me. The cold stone floor seeped through my simple dress, but I barely felt it. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to hide, to pretend I'd heard nothing. It would be so easy to slip away, to return to my tiny room in the forgotten wing of the castle and lock the door behind me. By morning, it would all be over. The king would be dead, and I would be safe in my insignificance. But I couldn't stop seeing his face. That loneliness in his eyes, the weight of a crown that had cost him everything. He didn't deserve this betrayal. Whatever his faults, whatever hardness the throne had carved into him, no one deserved to be murdered by someone they'd trusted with their heart. I pulled myself to my feet, my decision crystallizing into something solid and immovable. I didn't know how, but I had to warn him. Even if it cost me everything I had left, which admittedly wasn't much, I couldn't live with myself if I did nothing. The challenge was access. The Alpha King didn't simply walk among the common crowd. He was surrounded by guards, advisors, and now his treacherous fiancée. I couldn't approach him directly without causing a scene, and any message passed through official channels would likely be intercepted or dismissed. I returned to the Great Hall, my mind racing. The celebration had intensified. Wine flowed freely, and the music had grown louder. I scanned the room until I found him again. He stood near the dais, engaged in conversation with several territory lords. Celeste was at his side, her hand resting on his arm with practiced affection. The sight made my stomach turn. An idea formed, desperate and dangerous. The serving staff moved through the crowd with trays of wine and delicacies. They were the only ones who could approach the king freely, their presence so commonplace they were practically invisible, just like me. I found an abandoned tray on a side table and straightened my spine. My heart thundered in my chest as I lifted it, trying to emulate the efficient grace of the actual servants. No one looked at me twice. Invisibility, I'd learned, was both a curse and a gift. I needed paper, something to write on. My eyes landed on the program for the evening's events, stacked neatly on a nearby table. I grabbed one, along with a charcoal pencil someone had left behind. My hands trembled as I wrote, the words coming out jagged and urgent. Your fiancé sold you out. Valdorn clan. 15 men positioned as servants. They strike at midnight in your chambers. Trust no one but yourself. Someone who heard everything. I folded it quickly, my palms slick with sweat. This was insane. If anyone saw me, if anyone questioned what I was doing, I'd be arrested on the spot. But the alternative, doing nothing, was impossible to bear. I moved through the crowd with the tray balanced in my hands, weaving between clusters of conversation. Each step felt like walking through water, slow and surreal. I could barely hear the music over the rushing in my ears. He was 20 feet away, then 10, then 5. Up close, he was even more imposing. The lines around his eyes spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. There was a hardness to his jaw, a tension in his shoulders that suggested he carried the weight of his entire kingdom on his back. He smelled of pine and smoke, of winter wind and something darker I couldn't name. Celeste was speaking, her voice musical and light, saying something about the upcoming spring festivals. The king nodded politely, but his attention seemed elsewhere, his gaze distant. I approached from his left side, the tray extended as if offering wine. My whole body trembled. This was the moment. If I failed, if the note fell to the ground or was intercepted, it was over. "Your Majesty," I murmured, my voice barely audible over the surrounding noise. His eyes flicked to me, and for a heartbeat, our gazes met. I saw surprise there, perhaps because I'd spoken at all, or perhaps because of what he saw in my face. I'd never been good at hiding my emotions, and right now, every ounce of my fear and desperation must have been written across my features. I placed the tray on the nearby table with shaking hands, and in the same motion, I pressed the folded note directly into his palm. His fingers closed around it automatically, his expression shifting from surprise to sharp focus. "Trust nothing," I whispered, so quietly that only supernatural hearing could have caught it. "Especially not love." Then I turned and walked away before my courage could fail me completely. I didn't run. Running would draw attention, but each step felt like an eternity. I expected at any moment to hear guards shouting, to feel hands grabbing my arms, dragging me back, but nothing happened. The crowd swallowed me up, and I disappeared back into the shadows where I belonged. I made it to the corridor before my legs gave out again. I leaned against the wall, breathing hard, my entire body shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. I'd done it. I'd actually done it. Whether he would believe me, whether he would act on the warning or dismiss it as the ravings of a madwoman, I didn't know. But I'd tried. For the first time in 3 years, I'd done something other than simply survive. And now, all I could do was wait and see if the Alpha King would live to see the morning. I didn't sleep. How could I? I lay in my narrow bed in the servants' wing, staring at the cracked ceiling while my mind replayed every moment of the evening. The note. His eyes meeting mine, the way his fingers had closed around the paper with such immediate understanding. Had he read it? Had he believed it? Or had he dismissed it as the desperate plea of some attention-seeking fool? The castle felt different in the deep hours of night. The celebration had ended around 11, the guests dispersing to their various chambers throughout the sprawling complex. I'd watched from my window as carriages departed, as drunken nobles stumbled toward guest quarters, as the lights in the great hall finally dimmed. Midnight came and went. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for sounds of conflict, of guards rushing through hallways, of anything that might indicate violence unfolding in the king's chambers. But there was only silence, thick and oppressive. At some point near dawn, exhaustion finally claimed me. I fell into a fitful sleep filled with nightmares. Blood on marble floors, Celeste's cruel laughter echoing through empty halls, and those gray eyes staring at me with accusation and disappointment. I woke to someone pounding on my door. "Open up." By order of the royal guard. My heart stopped. This was it. They'd come for me. Whatever had happened during the night, I was about to pay the price for my interference. I opened the door with shaking hands to find 2 guards in full armor, their expressions grim and unyielding. Behind them stood a woman I recognized as one of the senior household staff, her face pinched with disapproval. "You're to come with us immediately," the taller guard said. His hand rested on the pommel of his sword, not quite threatening but making his authority clear. "What's happened?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. "Questions will be answered by those with authority to answer them. Move." They escorted me through the castle, and with each step, my dread grew. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, illuminating tapestries and portraits of previous rulers. Everything looked so normal, so peaceful. Had I imagined the whole thing? Had my lonely, desperate mind conjured a conspiracy where none existed? But then I noticed the details. Guards posted at intervals that seemed excessive for an ordinary morning. Staff members whispering in corners, their faces tight with anxiety. An unusual tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. They led me to the private council chambers, a room I'd never entered before. The walls were lined with books and maps, the furniture heavy and masculine. And there, standing by the window with his back to the door, was the Alpha King. He turned as I entered, and I nearly gasped. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His jaw was shadowed with stubble. His shirt was partially unbuttoned, and there was a wildness in his eyes that spoke of recent violence. But he was alive. Whole. Breathing. Relief crashed through me so powerfully my knees nearly buckled. "Leave us," he said quietly. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed, closing the heavy doors behind them. The sound of the lock engaging echoed like a gunshot. We were alone. He studied me in the morning light, and I realized this was the first time he was truly seeing me. Not the shadow serving wine, not the ghost at the edge of celebrations, but me. I felt exposed in a way that had nothing to do with clothing and everything to do with being witnessed. "What's your name?" His voice was rougher than I expected, scraped raw by whatever had transpired in the dark hours. "Sarah Whitmore, Your Majesty." I managed a clumsy curtsy, my body remembering protocols my mind had nearly forgotten. "Whitmore." He tested the name, and I saw recognition dawn. Thomas Whitmore's daughter. I flinched. My father's name was still a wound that hadn't healed. "Yes." He was accused of embezzling from the royal treasury, executed 3 years ago. He was innocent. The words escaped before I could stop them, sharp and defensive. The evidence was fabricated, but no one believed him. No one cared to look deeper. Something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, but understanding. The world is rarely interested in truth when lies are more convenient. He moved to a side table where my note lay unfolded, the charcoal words stark against the cream paper. "You wrote this." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes." "How did you know?" I explained everything, the overheard conversation, the details about the Valdorn clan, Celeste's involvement. With each word, his expression grew harder, more dangerous. This was the Alpha King who'd survived assassination attempts, who'd crushed rebellions, who ruled with an iron fist because mercy had nearly cost him everything. "Did you confront her?" I asked when I'd finished, unable to bear the silence. "I set a trap." He moved to the window, looking out over the gardens below. "I followed your warning, changed my route to the chambers, positioned my most trusted guards in strategic locations. When the 15 men revealed themselves, we were ready. What happened to them? Dead or captured, all of them." His voice was flat, emotionless. He'd killed before, I realized. Many times. It barely registered anymore. They confirmed everything. The Valdorn involvement, the payment promised to Celeste, the timeline of the attack. "You saved my life, Sarah Whitmore." The way he said my name made something flutter in my chest, dangerous and unwelcome. And Lady Celeste? I had to know. His laugh was bitter, devoid of humor. Gone. She fled sometime during the night when her conspirators failed to report back. We've sent trackers after her, but she had a head start. She'll likely cross the border into Valdorn territory before we can catch her. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate, but I meant them. Whatever else she was, she'd been his intended. That betrayal had to cut deep. He turned to face me fully, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. Sorry? You exposed a plot to end my life. You risked everything to warn a king you don't even know. Why? How could I explain? It wasn't right. What they were planning. You deserved to know. Most people in your position would have stayed silent. Safer that way. My mother taught me that some things matter more than safety. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Past tense. Always past tense. He studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself not to look away, despite every instinct screaming at me to lower my eyes, to return to the safety of invisibility. There was something happening in this room. some shift in the air between us that I didn't understand but could feel nonetheless. "The council is calling for a full investigation," he said finally. "They want to question everyone who was at the gathering last night. Your name will come up. People will want to know how He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "How someone in your position came to possess such sensitive information." Fear spiked through me. "Will I be arrested?" "No." The word was firm, absolute. "You're under my protection now. Anyone who questions your actions answers to me." The weight of those words settled over me like a cloak. Protection from the Alpha King was no small thing. It was also incredibly dangerous. In this world, nothing came without a price. "I don't understand," I admitted. "Why would you protect me? I'm nobody. My family name is ruined. I have no connections. No—" "You have courage." He interrupted me, moving closer. "You have honor. And you have the kind of perception most people lack. The ability to see what's hidden, to hear what others miss. Those qualities are worth more than any title or bloodline." He was standing close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes, could smell the scent of pine and winter that clung to him. My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm assembling a new inner circle," he continued, "people I can trust. After last night, I've realized that my previous advisors were either compromised or incompetent. I need eyes and ears I can rely on. I need someone who understands how to move through shadows and see what others overlook." Understanding dawned slowly. "You're offering me a position. More than a position. I'm offering you a purpose, a place, the chance to use your skills for something that matters." It was everything I'd lost when my father died. Relevance, belonging, the opportunity to be more than a ghost haunting the edges of other people's lives. But it was also terrifying, to step into the light, to be seen, to matter. It meant vulnerability. It meant I could be hurt again. "I need time to think," I whispered. "Take the day." He stepped back, giving me space to breathe. "But Sarah? The world you saved me from last night, it's still out there. The Valdorn clan won't stop because one plot failed. Celeste isn't the only person in this castle who might wish me dead. I need allies I can trust. I need you." The way he said that last part, "I need you," sent electricity down my spine. "There will be a gathering in the evening," he continued, his voice returning to its formal register. "A small dinner with the remaining council members and territory representatives. I want you there. Not as a servant, but as my guest. Let them see that you have my favor. Let them understand that anyone who moves against you moves against me. Your Majesty, I don't have the clothes for—" "That will be arranged." He moved to the door, preparing to summon the guards back. But he paused, his hand on the handle, and looked back at me one more time. "You were right about what you said last night. Trust nothing, especially not love. It's a lesson I've learned the hard way. But perhaps," his voice softened, "perhaps there are other things worth trusting. Courage, honor, the kind of loyalty that asks for nothing in return." Then he opened the door, and the moment shattered. The guards entered, their presence returning us to our proper roles, king and subject, powerful and powerless. Except I didn't feel powerless anymore. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I was escorted back to my quarters where I found that my small room had been transformed. A new wardrobe had been delivered, filled with dresses in rich fabrics I'd never dreamed of wearing, deep blues and forest greens, elegant blacks and soft silvers. A lady's maid appeared, a kind-faced woman named Helena, who didn't ask questions, just helped me bathe and arranged my pale hair in a style that made me look like someone who belonged in these clothes. In the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The girl staring back at me had clear eyes and straight shoulders. She looked like someone who mattered, but beneath the fine dress and styled hair, I was still Sarah, still afraid, still carrying the weight of my father's disgrace and my mother's death, still uncertain whether I was brave or simply foolish. As evening approached, Helena helped me into a gown of midnight blue that brought out the color of my eyes. The fabric whispered against my skin, foreign and luxurious. "You look beautiful, miss," Helena said softly. like you were born to wear such things. I wasn't sure about that. But when the guards came to escort me to dinner, I held my head high and followed them through corridors I'd only ever cleaned, toward a future I couldn't begin to predict. The dining room was smaller than I expected, intimate even. A table set for 12, with candles casting golden light across fine china and crystal glasses. The other guests were already assembled. Council members I recognized from the previous night. Territory lords whose names I'd memorized during my years of invisible observation. They all turned to stare as I entered. And standing at the head of the table, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, was the Alpha King. He was dressed formally now, all traces of the previous night's chaos erased. But when our eyes met, I saw something flicker in his gaze. Recognition. Gratitude. And something else. Something that made my pulse quicken. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying easily through the room. "Allow me to introduce Sarah Whitmore. She will be joining my personal counsel as an advisor on matters of security and intelligence." The silence that followed was deafening. Then, slowly, the Alpha King smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, and extended his hand toward the empty seat at his right, the seat of honor. I walked toward it on legs that barely supported me, aware of every eye tracking my movement, of the whispers that would follow this moment into every corner of the kingdom. Everything had changed. Everything was beginning, and I had no idea if I was ready for what came next. The dinner was a test, and everyone in that room knew it. I sat at the Alpha King's right hand, while the council members and territory lords assessed me with varying degrees of skepticism and hostility. They smiled when protocol demanded it, made polite conversation when the king's attention turned our way, but their eyes were cold. I was an interloper, a nobody who'd somehow maneuvered herself into a position of unprecedented access and influence. If only they knew how desperately I wanted to disappear. "Miss Whitmore," Lord Garrison began, his voice dripping with false courtesy. He was an older wolf, his gray hair still thick, his build suggesting a warrior's past. "His Majesty mentioned you'd be advising on security matters. Tell us what exactly qualifies you for such a sensitive position." The table fell silent. Forks paused midair. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. The chance to expose me as a fraud. I felt the king tense beside me, preparing to intervene. But something in me refused to hide behind his protection. If I was going to survive in this world, I needed to prove I belonged here on my own merit. "I've spent 3 years being invisible, Lord Garrison," I said quietly, meeting his gaze. "I've watched, listened, and learned, while everyone else was too busy performing their importance to notice what was actually happening around them. I know which servants gossip, which guards drink too much, which nobles meet in corners when they think no one's watching. Invisibility taught me to see everything. And last night, that skill saved our king's life." Lord Garrison's eyes narrowed, but he nodded slowly, a grudging respect perhaps, or simply acknowledgement that I wouldn't be easily dismissed. The meal continued with stilted conversation about territory disputes and trade agreements. I mostly listened, absorbing the dynamics at play. There was Lord Thaddeus, young and ambitious, who kept glancing at me with open curiosity. Lady Morgana, one of only 2 women at the table besides myself, who studied me with sharp intelligence. And Commander Brennan, head of the Royal Guard, whose weathered face revealed nothing but whose silence felt weighted with judgment. It was Brennan who finally addressed me directly as dessert was being served. "The king tells me you overheard the plot by accident," he said, his voice gravelly from years of shouting orders. "Remarkable timing. Some might even call it suspicious." My stomach clenched. So that's how it would be. They suspected me of being involved, of orchestrating some elaborate scheme. "Commander," the king's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Sarah risked everything to warn me. She had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I won't have her loyalty questioned. Your Majesty, with respect, we must question everything." Lady Celeste was above suspicion too, until she wasn't. The king's jaw tightened, and I could feel the anger radiating from him. But Brennan was right, in a way. They had to be careful. Betrayal had come from the person closest to the throne. Why not from some desperate girl seeking advancement? "It's all right," I said softly, touching the king's arm before I could think better of it. The contact sent a jolt through both of us, but I didn't pull away. The commander's caution is wise. If I were in his position, I'd be suspicious too. I turned to Brennan, forcing myself to hold his hard gaze. I can't prove my intentions were pure, Commander. I have no witnesses to support my story, no evidence beyond what I heard. You'll have to decide for yourself whether to trust me. But know this. I've lost everything once already. My father, my mother, my place in this world. I know what it's like to have your life destroyed by lies and political games. I wouldn't inflict that kind of pain on anyone, not even for personal gain. Something shifted in Brennan's expression. Not quite warmth, but a softening of the granite disapproval. Fair enough, Miss Whitmore. Time will tell. The evening finally ended near midnight. As the guests departed, making their formal goodbyes to the king, I stood awkwardly to the side, unsure of my role now that the performance was over. Stay, the king said quietly as the last guest departed. Please. We were alone again, just as we'd been that morning, but this felt different, more intimate. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion I'd noticed earlier. You did well tonight, he said, pouring 2 glasses of wine from a decanter on the sideboard. He offered me one, and I took it with trembling fingers. Better than well. You held your ground. They all think I'm using you. The wine was rich and dark on my tongue, warming me from the inside. Let them think what they want. I know the truth. He moved to the fireplace, staring into the dying flames. Do you know what the worst part of last night was? I waited, sensing he needed to speak more than I needed to answer. Not the assassination attempt. Not even Celeste's betrayal, though that... He paused, pain flickering across his features. The worst part was realizing how completely alone I am. I'm surrounded by hundreds of people. Yet there's not a single person in this entire kingdom I can truly trust, until you. You don't know me, Your Majesty, not really. Don't I? He turned to face me, and the vulnerability in his eyes made my breath catch. You risked everything for a stranger. You asked for nothing in return. In my experience, that kind of integrity is rarer than any treasure. Or maybe I'm just foolish. Then I'll take foolish loyalty over calculated self-interest any day. He set down his glass and moved closer. I want to show you something. Will you trust me? It should have been frightening, being alone with the most powerful man in the kingdom, following him deeper into the private royal quarters. But somehow, with him, I felt safer than I had in years. He led me through corridors I'd never seen, past guards who nodded in recognition, until we reached a heavy oak door. He produced a key from his pocket and unlocked it, gesturing me inside. The room beyond took my breath away. It was a library, but unlike any I'd ever seen. Books lined every wall from floor to ceiling, thousands of volumes and leather bindings of every color. A massive fireplace dominated one wall, and comfortable chairs were positioned near the windows that overlooked the moonlit gardens. This was my mother's sanctuary, he said softly, lighting lamps throughout the space. When the weight of the crown became too much, she'd come here to remember who she was beneath the title. It's beautiful. I moved between the shelves, trailing my fingers along the spines. I didn't know she was a scholar. Most people didn't. They saw her as an ornament, a pretty face beside my father's throne. But she was brilliant. She spoke 6 languages, studied philosophy and strategy. Much of my father's success was actually her wisdom, whispered in private where no one else could hear. There was such love in his voice when he spoke of her. And grief. She died when you were young, I said gently. It wasn't a question. Everyone knew the story. The previous queen had fallen ill with a wasting sickness when Dominic was barely 15, 12 years ago now. Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Sometimes like another lifetime. He pulled a book from a high shelf, handling it with reverent care. She kept journals, private thoughts about ruling, about life in the court. I still read them when I need guidance. He opened the leather-bound volume, and I saw pages filled with elegant handwriting, a woman's voice preserved in ink. Power is loneliest at the top, he read aloud. Everyone wants something from you. Love becomes transaction, loyalty becomes negotiation. The challenge is remembering your own humanity when everyone else sees only your crown. His voice cracked slightly on the last words. I watched this powerful king, this alpha who commanded armies and ruled territories, reduced to a grieving son missing his mother. It was the most human thing I'd ever witnessed. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked. "Because I need you to understand what you're agreeing to by joining my council. It's not just about attending dinners and whispering secrets. It's about entering a world where trust is a luxury and genuine connection is almost impossible. I need to know if you're prepared for that." I thought about my own loneliness. The 3 years I'd spent as a ghost. I understood isolation, perhaps better than he knew. "I've been alone for a long time, Your Majesty. At least in your world, the loneliness serves a purpose." "Dominic," he said suddenly. "When we're alone, call me Dominic. I'm tired of being Your Majesty every moment of every day." The intimacy of using his name felt dangerous and thrilling all at once. "Dominic," I tested, and watched something warm kindle in his eyes. We spent hours in that library. He showed me his mother's favorite books, told me stories about his childhood before the crown consumed his life. I found myself sharing things I'd never told anyone. My mother's final days, my father's execution, the crushing weight of surviving when everyone you love is gone. Somewhere during those conversations, we'd moved from opposite sides of the room to sitting side by side on the window seat, the moonlight painting us both silver. His hand rested near mine on the cushion between us, close enough that I could feel its warmth. "I need to ask you something," he said, as the first hints of dawn began touching the horizon. "And I need you to answer honestly." "All right. Are you afraid of me?" The question surprised me. I considered lying, giving him the answer I thought he wanted. But he'd asked for honesty. "Yes," I admitted. "You're the Alpha King. You have the power to destroy me with a word. How could I not be afraid? And yet you're here, alone with me, trusting me with your stories." Fear and trust aren't mutually exclusive. My mother taught me that too. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is trust despite our fear. He turned to face me fully, and suddenly the space between us felt charged with possibility. "I'm afraid too," he confessed. "Of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person again. He paused, his gaze dropping to my lips before returning to my eyes. "Of wanting something I have no right to want." My heart hammered so hard I was certain he could hear it. "What do you want?" The question hung between us, heavy with implication. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then slowly, carefully, he reached out and tucked a strand of pale hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered against my cheek, and I couldn't suppress the shiver that ran through me. "I want to not be alone," he whispered. "I want someone who sees me, not the crown. I want—" He didn't finish. Instead, he pulled back, standing abruptly and putting distance between us. The loss of his warmth felt like winter returning. "It's late," he said, his voice rough. "I should escort you back to your quarters before the household wakes. We've already given the gossips enough material for a year." I understood what he wasn't saying. Whatever was beginning to form between us was dangerous, complicated. He was still recovering from Celeste's betrayal, and I was his new advisor, a position that required clear boundaries and professional distance. But as he walked me through the awakening castle, as servants began their morning routines and guards changed shifts, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd looked at me in the moonlight, the longing in his eyes that mirrored my own. We stopped outside my door, the hallway still shadowed and quiet. "Thank you," I said, "for showing me your mother's library, for trusting me with your stories. Thank you for listening, for seeing past the crown." He hesitated, then added, "The council meets tomorrow afternoon. Your official duties begin then. Are you ready?" "No," I answered honestly, "but I'll do my best." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. That's all any of us can do. As I closed my door behind me and leaned against it, my heart still racing, I realized that everything had shifted again. I'd come to the capital 3 years ago as the disgraced daughter of a dead traitor. Now I was the Alpha King's trusted advisor, sitting at his council table, spending private hours in his mother's sanctuary. And somewhere in the space of 2 days, I'd started falling for a king who could never truly be mine. The morning sun streamed through my window, and I finally allowed myself to sleep, my dreams filled with gray eyes and moonlit libraries and the ghost of fingertips against my cheek. The council chamber was a room built for intimidation. High ceilings, dark wood panels, and a massive oval table that could seat 20. Maps covered the walls, territories marked in different colors, trade routes traced in gold, disputed borders highlighted in red. This was where the kingdom's future was decided, where power was brokered and battles were planned, and I was expected to sit here as if I belonged. The council members filed in throughout the early afternoon, taking their assigned seats with the casual confidence of people who'd done this hundreds of times. Lord Garrison nodded curtly in my direction. Lady Morgana offered a small smile that might have been genuine or might have been mockery. I couldn't tell yet. Commander Brennan ignored me entirely, his attention fixed on the reports spread before him. Dominic, the king, entered last, and the room immediately snapped to attention. He'd returned to his formal role, all traces of the vulnerable man from the library hidden behind layers of authority and control. He took his seat at the head of the table, and I sat at his right, acutely aware of every eye that tracked the placement. "Gentlemen, Lady Morgana, Miss Whitmore," he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute command. "We have much to discuss. The events of 2 nights ago have exposed weaknesses in our security that can no longer be ignored. Commander Brennan, your report." Brennan stood, his military bearing evident in every movement. "The 15 assassins have all been interrogated. Most broke quickly under pressure. They confirmed Lady Celeste's role in coordinating the attack, as well as the Valdorn clan's financial backing. However, they've also revealed something more troubling." He paused, letting the tension build. "The Valdorn clan has been infiltrating the kingdom for months, perhaps longer. They have sympathizers within our borders, nobles, merchants, possibly even members of the guard. This wasn't just an isolated assassination attempt. It's part of a larger strategy to destabilize the kingdom from within." The words landed like stones in still water, ripples of unease spreading through the room. "How many?" Dominic's voice was ice. "How many traitors are we harboring?" "We don't know yet, Your Majesty. The captured men only knew their immediate contacts. But based on the sophistication of the operation, we're looking at a network. Possibly dozens of individuals working in coordination. Then we root them out." Lord Thaddeus spoke up, his young face flushed with anger. "Interrogate everyone who had contact with Lady Celeste. Trace her movements, her correspondences. Someone had to help her coordinate this. And risk alerting the network that we're hunting them?" Lady Morgana countered, her sharp eyes flicking between speakers. "The moment we start aggressive interrogations, anyone involved will go to ground. We'll catch the small fish while the true orchestrators escape." "So what do you suggest?" Thaddeus shot back. "We do nothing while traitors walk our halls?" "I suggest we think strategically instead of reactively." The argument escalated, voices rising as council members took sides. I sat quietly, absorbing the dynamics. This was how power worked: competing agendas, personal rivalries, everyone jockeying for influence while claiming to serve the kingdom's interest. "Enough." Dominic's single word cut through the noise like a blade. Silence fell immediately. "Miss Whitmore has been silent. I'd like to hear her perspective." Every head turned toward me. My mouth went dry. "Your Majesty, I'm not sure I—" "You saw what others missed," he interrupted gently. "You heard a conspiracy that everyone else was too distracted to notice. I value that perspective. Please, share your thoughts." I took a breath, organizing the ideas that had been forming since Brennan's report. Lady Morgana is right about not alerting the network. But Lord Thaddeus is also right that we can't simply do nothing. The problem is that we're trying to hunt shadows when we should be creating light. "Explain." Dominic leaned forward, his full attention on me. "The network's strength is secrecy. They communicate through hidden channels, meet in dark corners, rely on the assumption that no one's watching. But what if we made them believe their cover was already blown, not through interrogations or arrests, but through strategic information?" "You mean disinformation," Brennan said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Make them panic." "Exactly. Let it slip through carefully chosen sources that we've captured one of their coordinators, someone high in the hierarchy, someone who's talking. Make them believe their network is compromised. When people panic, they make mistakes. They reach out to allies to warn them. They try to flee. They take actions that reveal themselves. And we watch, Lady Morgana finished, a smile playing at her lips. We watch to see who runs, who makes contact, who suddenly changes their behavior. It's risky, Lord Garrison interjected. If we're wrong about the scope of the infiltration, we could create chaos for nothing. We're not wrong. I met his gaze steadily. Celeste didn't orchestrate this alone. She was never that clever. Someone guided her, fed her information, told her exactly how to exploit the king's trust. That person is still here, watching, waiting for their next opportunity. The silence that followed was different this time. Thoughtful, rather than hostile. Dominic's expression revealed nothing, but I caught the slight nod of approval. Commander Brennan, work with Miss Whitmore to develop the specifics of this strategy. I want detailed plans by tomorrow. Lord Garrison, Lord Thaddeus, increase border patrols but do so quietly. If the Valdorn clan is planning another move, I want advance warning. Lady Morgana, use your network of informants to monitor any unusual activity among the noble houses. Orders were given, responsibilities assigned. The meeting continued for another 2 hours, covering everything from grain shipments to territorial disputes. I contributed when asked, but mostly I listened and learned. By the time we adjourned, my head was spinning with information. As the council members filed out, Dominic caught my arm gently. Stay a moment. When we were alone, his formal mask slipped slightly. That was well done. Your strategy is sound. It might not work, but it's better than anything else suggested. You see patterns others miss, Sarah. Don't diminish that gift. The use of my name in private sent warmth through my chest. I'm still learning. This world of strategy and politics, it's not something I was trained for. Neither was I. Not really. My father died when I was 22. I went from Crown Prince with years of preparation ahead of me to Alpha King overnight. The first year was... He paused. Shadows crossing his face. Difficult doesn't begin to describe it. I made mistakes. Trusted the wrong people. Nearly lost everything because I was too young and too certain I knew better than my advisors. What changed? I learned to listen, to value wisdom over pride. And I learned that intelligence comes in many forms. You don't need formal training to see truth. Sometimes fresh eyes see more clearly than experienced ones. He moved to the windows overlooking the training yards below. Young wolves were sparring under the afternoon sun, their movements fluid and powerful. I joined him, watching the display of strength and skill. There's something else we need to discuss, he said quietly. The position I've given you has made you a target. The network we discussed, they'll see you as a threat now. Someone who helped foil their plans. Someone who has my ear and trust. Ice trickled down my spine. I hadn't considered that. I'd been so focused on proving myself worthy of the position that I hadn't thought about the danger it brought. I'm assigning you personal guards, he continued, 2 of Brennan's most trusted men. They'll be with you at all times outside your private quarters. That seems excessive. Celeste tried to kill me 2 nights ago. Do you think her allies will hesitate to eliminate someone they see as an obstacle? His voice was hard, brooking no argument. You're under my protection, Sarah. That means I protect you, whether you think it's necessary or not. The possessive edge in his tone made my pulse quicken. This wasn't just about security. There was something more, something neither of us was ready to name. There's a banquet in 3 days, he said, changing the subject abruptly. Representatives from the Eastern Territories are coming to discuss trade agreements. I need you there. As your advisor? As my companion. He turned to face me, and the intensity in his gray eyes stole my breath. I know it's soon after, everything. But the court needs to see that I'm not broken by Celeste's betrayal. That I'm moving forward. And I need... He paused, vulnerability flickering across his features. I need someone beside me I can trust. Someone real. People will talk. People always talk. Let them. Dominic. I used his name deliberately, watching him react to the intimacy of it. What are we doing? This isn't just professional anymore, is it? He was quiet for a long moment, conflict warring in his expression. No, he finally admitted. It's not, and I know that's dangerous. You work for me, You're my advisor. There are power dynamics and complications, and 100 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I can't stop thinking about you. About the way you looked in the moonlight. About your courage and your kindness and the fact that you're the first person in years who's made me feel like something other than a crown. My heart hammered against my ribs. I think about you too, more than I should. Then what do we do about it? It was the question that had kept me awake after our night in the library. The question that had no easy answer. I don't know, I whispered. But I know I'm not strong enough to walk away. Good. He reached out, his fingers finding mine and intertwining them. The contact sent electricity up my arm. Because neither am I. We stood like that, hands joined, neither of us willing to move further or pull apart. Outside, the sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Inside, something fragile and precious was taking root between us. The moment shattered when a sharp knock echoed through the chamber. We separated quickly, putting professional distance between us as Commander Brennan entered. Your Majesty, apologies for the interruption. His weathered face was grim. We've had a development. One of the captured assassins has asked to speak with you directly. He claims to have information about someone in the inner circle, someone close to the throne. Dominic's expression hardened immediately, all traces of softness vanishing. When? Now, if you're willing. He's asking for immunity in exchange for the information. Absolutely not. He tried to kill me. He gets nothing. He says without protection, what he knows will die with him, that the person he's naming has the reach to silence him even in our deepest cells. I watched Dominic process this, saw the calculation behind his eyes. This was the Alpha King making decisions that could alter the kingdom's future. Fine. Conditional immunity, pending verification of his information. If he's lying, the deal is void. Miss Whitmore, you'll accompany me. Brennan's eyebrows rose slightly. Your Majesty, is that wise? This could be dangerous, which is exactly why I want her there. She reads people better than any of us. If he's lying, she'll catch it. We followed Brennan through the castle depths, down stone stairs that grew colder and damper with each level. The dungeons were ancient, built long before the current castle. Their walls thick and impenetrable. Guards nodded as we passed, their expressions carefully neutral. The prisoner was held in a cell at the corridor's end. He was younger than I expected, maybe 30, with the lean build of someone who lived by stealth rather than strength. When we entered, he looked up from where he sat against the wall, chains binding his wrists and ankles. Your Majesty. His voice was hoarse, probably from screaming during interrogation. Thank you for seeing me. Speak quickly, Dominic said coldly. You have 5 minutes to convince me your information is worth your miserable life. The prisoner's eyes flicked to me, curiosity and calculation mixing in his gaze. Who's she? None of your concern. 4 minutes. Right. Fine. He shifted, chains clanking. You're looking for the network inside your kingdom. You want names. I'll give you one name. The person who coordinated everything with Lady Celeste. The person who's been feeding information to the Valdorn clan for over a year. Who? The single word cracked like a whip. The prisoner smiled, and something in that expression made my blood run cold. Lord Garrison, your most trusted advisor, the man who sat at your right hand for 5 years. He's the one who's been selling you out all along. The silence in that cell was absolute. Dominic's face had gone completely blank, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. I could feel the rage building in him, coiled tight like a spring about to snap. You're lying, he said, his voice deadly quiet. Am I? The prisoner leaned back against the stone wall, chains rattling. Ask yourself, Your Majesty, who suggested Lady Celeste as a potential match? Who advocated loudest for the engagement? Who had access to your schedule, your security arrangements, your private chambers? Lord Garrison has served this crown for decades. He served my father before me and resented every moment of it. Did you know his family once ruled the Northern Territories? Before your grandfather stripped them of their titles for rebellion, the Garrisons have been waiting generations for revenge. This was their chance. I watched the prisoner carefully, analyzing every micro-expression, every vocal inflection. My years of observation had taught me to read deception, and what I saw now terrified me. He was telling the truth. "Dominic," I said softly, drawing his attention. "We need to verify this before we act. If it's true, Garrison can't know we suspect him. If it's false..." I glanced at the prisoner. "Then we've been manipulated." The prisoner laughed, bitter and sharp. "Smart girl. But I can prove it. Garrison and I have a signal. Every week he leaves a mark on the third column in the eastern corridor, a small scratch at eye level. If the mark is there, it means it's safe to make contact. If it's absent, something's wrong. Check the column. If my mark is there from 3 days ago and his is missing, you'll know I'm telling the truth." He stopped marking after the assassination failed. Dominic looked at Brennan. "Check it. Now." The commander left immediately, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. We waited in tense silence, the prisoner watching us with those calculating eyes. "Why betray him now?" I asked. "If Garrison's been protecting you, why expose him?" "Because I'm a dead man either way," the prisoner said simply. "At least this way, I might buy myself a few more years in a cell instead of a blade in the dark. Garrison doesn't tolerate loose ends. He would have had me killed within days to cover his tracks." 5 agonizing minutes later, Brennan returned. His face told the story before he spoke. "Both marks are there, exactly as described. Fresh scratches, couldn't be more than a few days old." The world tilted slightly. Lord Garrison, the stern, principled advisor who'd questioned my presence, who'd served the crown for decades, was a traitor, had been a traitor for years, working slowly and patiently to destroy everything from within. Dominic's hands clenched into fists. "How many others? In the castle? Just me and 2 kitchen staff who pass messages, but the network beyond the walls is larger. Garrison coordinates everything. Take him down and the whole operation falls apart. We need to move carefully," I said, my mind already racing through possibilities. "If we arrest him openly, his allies outside will disappear. We'll never find them all. What do you suggest?" Dominic's voice was strained, barely controlled fury bleeding through. An idea was forming, risky and dangerous, but possibly our only chance. "The banquet in 3 days. Garrison will be there. We use it as a stage. We feed him false information. Make him believe we've identified a different traitor, someone unimportant. Let him think he's safe. That suspicion has turned elsewhere." "And then?" Brennan asked. "Then we watch who he contacts, who he warns. We let him lead us to the network before we close the trap." The prisoner was nodding. "That could work, but you'd need to make it convincing. Garrison is paranoid, smart. He'll smell a trap unless it's perfect." We spent the next hour extracting every detail the prisoner knew. Names, locations, communication methods. By the time we emerged from the dungeons, dawn was breaking outside, and my head throbbed with information overload. Dominic dismissed Brennan with orders to begin discreet surveillance on Garrison. When we were alone in the corridor, he slumped against the wall, the weight of betrayal evident in every line of his body. 5 years, he said hollowly. 5 years he sat across from me, advised me, pretended to care about this kingdom. How many decisions did he influence? How many opportunities did he sabotage? How many people died because I trusted him? I moved closer, careful not to touch but offering presence. "You couldn't have known. I should have known. It's my job to know." He looked at me then, and the pain in his eyes was devastating. "Everyone I trust betrays me eventually. Celeste. Garrison, who's next? When will it be your turn to sell me out?" The words stung, but I understood where they came from. "I can't prove I won't," I said quietly. "I can only tell you that every day I choose to be here, it's a choice. Not obligation, not manipulation. Choice." He studied my face in the dim corridor light, searching for deception. Whatever he saw made something in him soften slightly. "I'm tired of being alone," he whispered. "I'm tired of wondering if the person standing next to me is planning my death." "Then let me stand next to you. Let me be the one person you don't have to question." He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his hand cupped my cheek, thumb brushing across my skin with devastating gentleness. "You're the only real thing in my life right now. Do you know that? Dominic." He kissed me. It wasn't rushed or aggressive, it was soft, almost questioning, as if asking permission even as he took it. His lips were warm against mine, tasting of wine and something darker. I froze for a heartbeat, shocked by the reality of it, before my body responded instinctively. My hands found his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath my palms. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. I shouldn't have done that, he said, though he made no move to step away. Probably not, I agreed. But I'm glad you did. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. This is dangerous, complicated. Everything worth having is. He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I let myself drown in it. In him. In the impossible reality that the Alpha King wanted me, trusted me, needed me. That somehow, in the space of days, my entire world had shifted. We broke apart when voices echoed from a nearby stairwell. Reality reasserted itself. We were in a public corridor. Dawn was breaking, and we had a kingdom to save from internal collapse. The banquet, I said, trying to refocus on something practical. We need to plan every detail. Later, he murmured, pressing his forehead to mine. Right now, I just need this. Need you. Just for a moment. So we stood there, tangled together in the empty corridor, stealing a moment of peace before the storm to come. The next 3 days were a carefully orchestrated performance. We fed Garrison false information through multiple channels, each piece designed to point toward a minor border lord as the suspected traitor. We watched as Garrison absorbed the information, watched for any sign that he suspected the trap. He was good. I had to give him that. His reactions were perfectly calibrated. Appropriate concern, helpful suggestions for investigation, not a flicker of relief or suspicion. If I hadn't known the truth, I never would have guessed. The banquet arrived with all its attendant chaos. The castle was transformed, every surface polished until it gleamed. Flowers imported from the southern territories filling the air with their heavy scent. My dress for the evening was emerald green, cut to emphasize the figure I'd always tried to hide. Helena had woven my pale hair into an intricate style, leaving a few strands loose to soften the effect. You look like a queen, she said softly, as she made final adjustments. The words sent a shiver through me, not fear exactly, but awareness of how dramatically my life had changed. A week ago, I'd been invisible. Now I was standing in the Alpha King's inner circle, hunting traitors and stealing kisses in darkened corridors. Dominic was waiting when I emerged. He'd chosen formal attire, black with silver threading that caught the light. When he saw me, something heated in his gaze. Beautiful, he said simply, offering his arm. We entered the banquet hall together, and the whispers started immediately. Everyone had heard rumors about the disgraced daughter who'd saved the king's life, who now sat on his council and appeared at his side. The gossip would be vicious and creative. But I'd learned to let such things slide off me like water. The evening progressed exactly as planned. We moved through the crowd, Dominic introducing me to representatives from various territories. I played my role perfectly, intelligent but deferential, observant but not threatening. And all the while, we watched Garrison. He was seated near the head table, conversing with the Eastern Lord about grain shipments. Nothing in his demeanor suggested guilt or concern. He even nodded respectfully in my direction when our eyes met. Midnight approached. According to our plan, Dominic would make a quiet announcement to his inner circle about the suspected border lord, asking for their counsel. Garrison would hear this, believe the investigation was moving in a safe direction, and likely make contact with his network to report the kingdom's focus was elsewhere, and we would be watching. Dominic stood, calling for the attention of his closest advisors. Garrison moved closer, along with Brennan, Lady Morgana, Lord Thaddeus, and a few others. I stood at Dominic's right, my heart hammering. My friends, Dominic began, his voice carrying the weight of concern. I've asked you here because we have a sensitive matter to discuss. Our investigation into the recent assassination attempt has revealed. He never finished the sentence. The eastern windows exploded inward in a shower of glass and wood. Screams erupted throughout the hall as figures in black poured through the openings. Armed, masked, moving with lethal precision, the Valdorn clan had launched a full assault. Chaos descended. Guests scattered in every direction as the attackers cut through the crowd. Dominic's personal guards formed a protective circle immediately, but they were outnumbered. Steel clashed against steel, blood splattered across marble floors. Through the chaos, I saw Garrison, and the expression on his face told me everything. This wasn't surprise, this was fury. The plan had changed. Someone had moved without his approval, launched this attack without consulting him, and now, his carefully constructed cover was disintegrating. "Brennan!" Dominic's roar cut through the noise. "Garrison is the traitor! Secure him!" But Garrison was already moving. He grabbed Lady Morgana, the person nearest to him, and put a blade to her throat. "Nobody moves, or she dies." The room froze. Lady Morgana's eyes were wide with shock and fear, but she remained still, understanding that any struggle would end her life. "You couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Garrison snarled, his cultured mask finally cracking to reveal the hatred beneath. "Had to keep digging, keep questioning. This could have ended cleanly, but you forced my hand." "Let her go," Dominic said with deadly calm. "This is between you and me." "No, boy. This is between your family and mine. Your grandfather destroyed everything my family built. Your father continued the persecution. And you're just the latest in a line of tyrants who need to be erased." The attackers had stopped advancing, held in check by Brennan's forces but not defeated. We were at a stalemate. Garrison's blade at Morgana's throat, the hall filled with armed combatants on both sides, and then I saw it. The opening. Garrison's attention was fixed on Dominic, his body angled away from me. In his arrogance, he'd dismissed me as a threat, just another pretty face standing beside the king. He'd made the same mistake everyone made. He'd underestimated the invisible girl. I moved without thinking. 3 years of being overlooked had taught me how to be silent, how to move through spaces unnoticed. I covered the distance in seconds, grabbing a fallen knife from the floor as I went. "Garrison!" I shouted. He turned, startled, and in that moment of distraction, Lady Morgana wrenched free. I didn't hesitate. I'd spent my life avoiding violence, hiding from conflict. But this was different. This was protecting the people I'd come to care about. The knife flew from my hand with more luck than skill, embedding itself in Garrison's shoulder. He screamed, dropping his weapon. Brennan's guards were on him in seconds, forcing him to the ground. The Valdorn attackers, seeing their coordinator captured, began to retreat, but Dominic's forces were ready. The southern doors burst open, revealing additional guards who'd been positioned there as part of our contingency plan. The attackers were surrounded. "Surrender or die!" Brennan's voice boomed through the hall. "Choose now!" One by one, the attackers threw down their weapons. The battle was over almost as quickly as it had begun. I stood in the center of the destroyed banquet hall, my emerald dress splattered with blood that wasn't mine, my hands shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline. Dominic was beside me in an instant, his hands on my face, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt?" "Sarah, look at me. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine," I managed. "I'm fine. Is Lady Morgana?" "I'm alive, thanks to you," Morgana said, approaching with a shaken smile. "That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both," I admitted. The cleanup took hours. The wounded were tended to, the prisoners were secured in the dungeons, and the hall was slowly restored to order. Garrison had been dragged away, still screaming about ancient wrongs and justified revenge. The Valdorn attackers confirmed they'd acted on his urgent message that the king suspected the network and planned to move against them that very night. By moving up their attack timeline, Garrison had inadvertently exposed himself and destroyed his own network. As dawn broke for the second time that week, I found myself once again in the Alpha King's private library. We were both exhausted, still wearing our ruined formal clothes, but neither of us wanted to be alone. "You saved Morgana's life," Dominic said quietly. "You exposed Garrison. You may have saved the entire kingdom." "I just did what needed to be done. Most people freeze in moments like that. You acted." He pulled me close, and I went willingly into his arms. "You're remarkable, Sarah Whitmore. Do you know that? I'm just someone who learned to pay attention when everyone else was looking away. You're so much more than that." He tilted my chin up, his eyes searching mine. "I know this is fast. I know there are complications and political implications and 100 reasons to be cautious. But I don't care anymore. I want you. Not as an advisor, not as a strategic asset. I want you beside me, truly beside me. My heart swelled with emotions too big to name. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we rebuild from this, when the trials are over and the network is dismantled, I want to court you properly, publicly. I want everyone to know that you're mine and I'm yours. Dominic, I'm nobody, a disgraced nobleman's daughter. The court will accept it because I say so, and because you've earned your place 100 times over. He smiled, that rare, genuine smile I'd come to treasure. Besides, my mother always said the best queens were the ones who understood what it meant to struggle, who knew how to see what others overlooked. Are you asking me to be your queen? The words came out barely above a whisper. Eventually, when you're ready, when we're both ready. For now, I'm just asking you to stay, to be with me, to help me build a kingdom where loyalty and courage matter more than bloodlines and politics. I thought of my mother's final words. Sometimes it's knowing when to watch, when to listen, and when to act. I'd spent 3 years watching and listening. Maybe it was finally time to act. Yes, I said simply. Yes to all of it. He kissed me as the sun rose over the kingdom, painting the library in shades of gold and amber. Outside, the world was waking to news of the attempted attack, the exposed traitor, the dismantled network. Inside, 2 lonely people who'd found each other against all odds held tight to something precious and real. 6 months later, I stood in the same great hall where this had all begun, wearing white instead of emerald. The pale fabric complemented my light hair, which Helena had woven with actual diamonds this time. The hall had been completely restored, all evidence of the attack erased. Dominic waited at the altar in formal regalia, the crown resting on his dark hair, but his eyes held only warmth as I approached. Lady Morgana stood as my attendant, having become a true friend in the months since the attack. Commander Brennan looked almost approving. The council members who'd survived the purge of Garrison's network watched with genuine respect. My father's name had been cleared. Evidence found in Garrison's possessions proved the embezzlement charges had been fabricated to remove a loyal advisor who might have questioned his influence. My mother would have been proud to see this day. As I took Dominic's hand and spoke the vows that would make me queen, I thought about how far I'd traveled from that invisible girl in the shadows. I'd learned that strength came in many forms, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but action despite it. That sometimes the people who seemed weakest held the most power to change everything. I love you, Dominic whispered, as we were pronounced king and queen, husband and wife. I love you too, I whispered back. My king, my partner, my choice. The crowd erupted in cheers as we kissed, sealing the promise of a new era, the disgraced daughter and the lonely king, together building something stronger than either could have achieved alone. And in that moment, surrounded by people who now saw me clearly, I finally understood what my mother had meant. Strength wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet courage to act when everyone else stayed silent, to trust when betrayal seemed inevitable, to love when loneliness felt safer. I was no longer invisible. I was no longer alone. I was exactly where I belonged.